Hello and welcome. You are listening to Pint Size Therapy, where we explore all things related to mental health healing, personal growth and development, emotional wellness, and the human experience in pint-sized bites. I am your host, Dr. Aletha Clark, a licensed psychotherapist, certified hypnotherapist, and master addiction counselor, and I am happy to have you here with me today as you embark on your mental wellness journey. While I appreciate you tuning in, don't forget this podcast is informational only and is not a substitute for seeking out your own mental health counseling with a licensed professional. So join me as we jump into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I'm so glad that you are here with me today. Over the next few weeks, we're going to take an honest, compassionate look at codependence, what it is, how it develops, how it shows up in our relationships, the impact it has on our lives, and most importantly, how do we begin breaking free? Codependence is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot by many people, but they don't fully understand what it actually means. Some people even laugh it off. Oh, I'm just codependent with my partner. But in reality, codependence is a serious relational problem, and it's a serious relational pattern that can keep us stuck in cycles of unhealthy love, self-abandonment, and emotional exhaustion. Today, in this first episode, we'll start by unpacking what codependence actually is, how it begins, and why it actually matters. So let's first begin by answering, so what is codependence? At its core, it's when a person's sense of identity and self-worth becomes heavily tied to someone else, most often a romantic partner, but it can also show up with our friends, with our family members, or even with our colleagues. A codependent person feels responsible for the other person's happiness, their moods, and even their choices. They overfunction in the relationship while underfunctioning for themselves. Their needs, their wants, and even their identity slowly slip into the background as they become consumed with caring for, with managing, or even controlling the other person. Another layer of this is the belief that it's their job to rescue or save the other person. They build their entire identity around being the fixer or the caretaker. This self-sacrificing role often feels noble, even loving, but in reality, it creates an unhealthy dynamic where one person is always giving and the other is always taking. The codependent partner may find their sense of purpose only in meeting the other's needs, leaving their own neglected or even ignored. And this ties directly into enabling behavior. Out of love, fear, or obligation, the codependent person may excuse harmful behaviors. They may cover up mistakes or make sacrifices to keep the other person from facing consequences. This can take the form of covering up or making excuses for your partner's behaviors. While it can feel like protecting or helping, enabling actually allows destructive patterns like addiction, irresponsibility, or emotional immaturity to continue unchecked. A powerful example of this shows up in the film When a Man Loves a Woman. Meg Ryan plays a woman struggling with alcohol use, and Andy Garcia plays her husband. He loves her deeply, but instead of holding her accountable, he often covers for her mistakes. He picks up the pieces after her drinking binges and tries to rescue her from the consequences of her behavior. His intentions come from love, but the effect is enabling. His rescuing role actually keeps her from confronting the reality of her drinking. That's what codependence often looks like. It's love mixed with fear and control wrapped up in self-sacrifice. In one particular scene, Alice, played by Meg Ryan, who is struggling with alcohol use, shows up to pick up her daughters from school while intoxicated. She's disoriented and ends up putting them in a very dangerous position. And when her husband, Michael, played by Andy Garcia, finds out, instead of holding her accountable or insisting she get help, he rushes in to smooth things over. He makes excuses, he reassures her, and even tries to fix the situation so the outside world won't see how bad things are. His love for her is real, but his actions enable her drinking to continue. And that moment captures what codependence often looks like. It's that rescuing, it's that covering up and sacrificing your own well-being in the name of love. Let's also pause for ourselves and consider, do I sometimes lose myself in love? Have I ever taken on the role of rescuer or fixer in a relationship? Have I ever believed it was my responsibility to keep someone else afloat, even at the expense of myself? And how has that shaped my identity or sense of purpose in love? I want us to take a moment to sit with these questions. They may bring up hard truths, but they also might be that first step that we need towards awareness and even healing. And now let's make an important distinction. There's a big difference between healthy interdependence and codependence. It may be a natural desire to want the best for a loved one or see them shine in a positive light. But when we engage in codependent and enabling behaviors, that is when the relationship becomes imbalanced and destructive. That is why it is important to differentiate between interdependence and codependence. See, in interdependence, two people are connected, but still maintain their individuality. They support each other without losing themselves. Interdependent people have separate hobbies, but they enjoy shared interest as well. And they contribute equally to the household and other responsibilities. They encourage each other to address concerning problems by accepting responsibility and not enabling them. However, in codependence, the balance is lost. One person's identity, their worth, and their peace of mind become dependent on another. They have no independent hobbies and only does what their partner wants. They take care of all of the responsibilities and accepts all of the blame when something is not done. They hide or resolve their partner's problematic behaviors, allowing them to avoid consequences. So, how does it develop? Codependence doesn't just appear out of nowhere in adulthood. It usually has roots in childhood experiences. If, for example, you grew up in a household where you were expected to take care of others emotionally, maybe you had to be the peacemaker, the caretaker, or the one who kept the family together. You learned early on that love was conditional on what you did for others. You were expected to self-sacrifice, to ignore and not confront problems. You were expected to stay silent even when you were being mistreated. Or maybe you witnessed a parent doing this, always making excuses for the other person or being that peacemaker. Maybe the parent always, took care of the other person to their own detriment, always bailing people out difficult situations, allowing them to avoid natural consequences, or even lacking their own individual identity that did not revolve around their partner. Trauma could also be a reason why codependence occurs. If you experienced abuse, neglect, or instability, you may have internalized the belief that your needs didn't matter, or that staying hyper-focused on someone else's needs was safer than focusing on your own. You might have developed a trauma response of fight, flight, or fawn, in which you either avoided uncomfortable situations, maybe you felt paralyzed in having to address uncomfortable situations, or learned to pacify the perpetrator during uncomfortable situations. And even our attachment styles sometimes can cause codependence. Attachment theory, it plays a role. For example, if you developed an anxious attachment style, you may constantly fear abandonment, leading you to cling tightly to partners or even give in to relationships just to feel secure. And these dynamics quietly shape the way we show up in love as adults. We often don't even realize we're repeating old patterns until the burnout, the resentment, or even the confusion sets in. So let's think back on our own history and experiences. What was the emotional climate like in your household as you were growing up? Were emotions openly expressed, or were they avoided? Did you feel safe to have needs of your own? Were you expected to be the strong one, or maybe the one who kept the peace? Take a moment and notice how your answers may connect to the way you show up in your relationships today. So, as we close today's conversation, I want to leave you with this thought. Codependence often begins with good intentions, the desire to love, to protect, to even help. But over time, those intentions can shift into patterns of rescuing, enabling, and losing sight of your own needs. When your identity becomes wrapped up in someone else's well-being, it's easy to wake up one day and realize you no longer recognize yourself. Awareness is that first step towards change. Simply noticing the ways you may have taken on the role of fixer, caretaker, or rescuer is powerful. It means you're beginning to see the pattern clearly. And with clarity comes the possibility of doing things differently. So as you move through the rest of your day, keep today's reflection in mind. Do I lose myself in love? Allow that question to sit with you without judgment, just curiosity. In our next episode, we're going to look more closely at the traits and red flags of codependence, especially in romantic relationships. We'll talk about people-pleasing, difficulty setting boundaries, and how behaviors like love bombing and fear of abandonment keep those cycles going. Until then, take a gentle moment for yourself. Check in with your own needs, and remember, you deserve to be in a relationship where your wholeness is honored and not hidden. As always, thank you for joining me today on Pint-Sized Therapy. If you found this conversation meaningful, I invite you to leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and share with your family and friends. Come visit my website at pintsizedtherapy.com and my Etsy shop at pintsizedtherapy.etsy.com, where you will find resources to accompany our various discussions and encourage you to continue your wellness journey. Once again, I am Dr. Aletha Clark. Until next time, remember to protect your peace and take care of your mental health.